Let's begin by acknowledging a truth most people resist. Sometimes the most powerful action you can take in a relationship is to step back. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but with clarity, with self-respect, with the deliberate intention to reclaim your own energy. When you're dealing with someone with an avoidant attachment style, this is not just a strategy, it's almost a necessity. Avoidants are wired to retreat at the slightest pressure, to pull away when closeness feels overwhelming. And what does most of the world do? We chase, we text, we call, we try to reason, to coax, to fix, and with every push, they pull further away. Here's where the principle of strategic withdrawal comes in. This is not about ignoring, not about manipulation. It's about creating a space, a vacuum even, where your presence, your energy, your value becomes undeniable precisely because it is absent. Think of it like this. When you remove yourself from the constant orbit of someone else's attention, something shifts. Suddenly they have to face the fact that you exist independently of them, that your life is not waiting on their validation, that your joy, your fulfillment, your essence is not negotiable. And in that realization, something remarkable happens. Their attention shifts, not because you've begged for it, but because your absence now carries weight. Psychologically, absence triggers reflection. Avoidants are masters of avoidance, yes, but they are also highly attuned observers. When you disappear with dignity, you are in effect holding up a mirror to their own emotional patterns. They notice what's missing, and that noticing often comes with discomfort. They feel a void they can't quite explain, a subtle but persistent awareness that something vital is no longer within reach. And here's the beauty of it. You don't have to engineer it. You don't have to play tricks. You simply exist fully in your own life, and that completeness is magnetic in a way that chasing never can be. This strategy requires courage. It demands a level of emotional sophistication that many people avoid because it feels counterintuitive. We have been conditioned to believe that love is about proximity, about constant availability, about doing everything to hold someone near. But love, real love, is as much about respect for yourself as it is about connection with another. When you step back, you're sending a message without saying a word. I am not dependent on your attention. I am not defined by your approval. And paradoxically, this detachment can ignite desire in ways relentless pursuit never will. Let me clarify something important. Strategic withdrawal is not about coldness or indifference. It is about self-possession. It is about choosing your own life, choosing your own growth, and honoring your boundaries. It is about saying, I matter, my time matters, my energy matters. And when you operate from that place, you move from being reactive to proactive. You stop playing someone else's emotional games, and instead, you orchestrate your own life with intention. Avoidance may try to test you, they may probe, they may push boundaries, but when you hold steady in your dignity, you are teaching them a lesson far deeper than words ever could. That true connection comes not from control, but from respect, both for yourself and for them. In practice, this looks like small, deliberate choices every day. Not answering every text immediately, not chasing every interaction, not surrendering your plans or your passions to their whims. It looks like saying no without guilt, prioritizing your growth, and cultivating a life so rich and fulfilling that your absence is felt not as abandonment, but as significance. You are not withdrawing to punish, you are withdrawing to empower yourself, and in doing so, you give them the rare opportunity to see your value through the lens of distance. And here's the final truth that makes all of this so potent. When you disappear with dignity, you are not creating scarcity to manipulate someone's feelings. You are simply embodying your worth so fully that absence itself becomes a form of communication. It is the silent but undeniable statement. I am complete, I am present in my own life, and I will not compromise that for anyone. And in that quiet assertion, the avoidant feels a pull they cannot rationalize, a curiosity and even craving that no amount of chasing could ever produce. So step back, not with fear, not with resentment, but with the unwavering certainty that your life is yours to lead. Disappear with dignity, and in doing so, you reveal your power. You reveal the magnetism of a person who cannot be held hostage by need, a person whose value shines brightest when fully independent. The paradox is clear. By letting go, you become unforgettable. And that, my friends, is the essence of strategic withdrawal. Let's dive deeper into a truth that most people overlook. Absence is not emptiness, it is power. We tend to think that being seen, being available, being constantly present is the key to connection. But when it comes to avoidance, that constant availability often backfires. They are wired to resist closeness, to shy away from emotional intensity, and to retreat when they feel pressured. And here's where absence becomes more than just a tactic. It becomes an irresistible force. Think about desire in its rawest form. Desire is never purely logical. Desire thrives in the unknown, in the space between what is attainable and what feels just out of reach. When you are always present, always accessible, there is no gap. There is no space for the mind or heart to wander, to imagine, to yearn. You become predictable, familiar, and ultimately less magnetic. But when you step back, when you allow absence to do its work, suddenly you are no longer a predictable fixture in someone else's life. You are a force that invites curiosity, reflection, and longing. Avoidants in particular are highly sensitive to this dynamic. Their attention is drawn to what they cannot fully control or define. When you remove yourself from the constant orbit of their awareness, you create a subtle tension in their psyche. They notice your absence in ways that words could never convey. It's not just that you are physically distant, it's that your presence is no longer taken for granted. They begin to measure the impact you had, the space you filled, and the quiet energy that now lingers where you used to be. And in that measurement, they start to feel something profoundly human. They start to miss you. This is where the paradox becomes clear. Desire is heightened not by pursuit, but by the conscious creation of absence. You might think it's counterintuitive. How can stepping away, choosing yourself, not answering every call, not being constantly available actually make someone crave you more? The answer lies in psychology. Humans, avoidance included, value what seems scarce, what seems independent, what is not easily controlled. Your absence signals your self-sufficiency. It signals your autonomy. And that signal, my friends, is irresistible. Now let's clarify an important distinction. We are not talking about emotional manipulation. This isn't about creating games, tricks, or schemes to make someone chase you. That's temporary, shallow, and often backfires. We are talking about alignment with your own life, your own values, your own priorities. When you step back, you are not diminishing your feelings for them. You are amplifying your commitment to yourself. You are showing without words that your happiness is not contingent on their behavior. And this authenticity, this clarity, is magnetic in a way that superficial pursuit never can be. Absence also provides perspective for both of you. Avoidants often live in patterns of avoidance because they are not fully aware of the impact of their behaviors. Your withdrawal creates a space where they can see, feel, and reflect. They begin to recognize what they are missing, and the subtle, quiet yearning begins. It is in that vacuum that they confront the reality that the connection they may have taken for granted was more valuable than they allowed themselves to admit. And this confrontation doesn't require words from you. It requires your consistent presence in your own life, your refusal to shrink or chase, your unwavering dignity. In essence, absence is not a void, it is a signal. It is a way of communicating that you are complete, whole, and unshakably grounded in your own value. And that signal is a form of attraction far more profound than attention-seeking ever could be. The avoidant feels it in the spaces you leave behind, in the quiet moments where your laughter, your energy, your insight, or your presence would normally have been. They feel it in the emptiness of routine they can no longer predict, and that feeling, subtle as it may be at first, grows into longing, it grows into craving. So when you choose absence, choose it not as a punishment, not as a strategy of control, but as an expression of your own self-respect and independence. Step into your life fully, pursue your passions relentlessly, and let the world see that you are not defined by someone else's presence or approval. In doing so, your absence is no longer a loss. It is a revelation. It is a mirror that shows them the value they failed to honor. And in that reflection, desire is born, nurtured, and intensified, not because you chased, but because you chose yourself. And here's the powerful takeaway. The true magnetism of absence lies in authenticity. When you are fully present in your own life, when you step back with dignity, your absence speaks louder than any words could. You become unforgettable, not because you were hard to reach, but because you were whole, complete, and unapologetically yourself. Let's talk about boundaries. Boundaries are often misunderstood. Many people think they are walls, barriers that shut others out. But boundaries are not about exclusion. They are about definition. They are the invisible lines that mark where your world ends and someone else's begins. And when it comes to relationships with avoidance, boundaries are not just helpful, they are essential. Without them, you become entangled in a cycle of chasing, retreating, giving, and compromising. With them, you reclaim your power, your clarity, and your dignity. Think about the dynamic with avoidance. They are experts at detecting neediness, at sensing when someone's sense of self is dependent on their approval or presence. That dependency is like a magnet for their withdrawal reflex. It triggers discomfort, subtle anxiety, even avoidance. But boundaries act as a counterforce. They communicate strength without aggression, clarity without hostility, and self-respect without ego. When you set a boundary, you are saying, I know my worth. I know what I will tolerate and what I won't. I will not compromise my peace for the sake of someone else's comfort or avoidance. This isn't theoretical. In practice, boundaries manifest in daily decisions, choosing when to respond to texts, deciding what you will accept emotionally, protecting your time, energy, and space. It's in the little things, the no you give without guilt, the limits you enforce without fear, the unwavering commitment to your own growth. And here's the critical part: avoidance notice. They sense authenticity, they sense consistency, and they sense strength. They may test, they may probe, but boundaries are your silent declaration. You are whole, independent, and unshakable. Boundaries also create a new kind of attraction. Avoidants are drawn to strength and self-possession. They are naturally resistant to emotional pressure, but they are compelled by clarity and consistency. When you operate without compromise, when you maintain your principles, even in the face of provocation or withdrawal, you create an internal magnetism they cannot ignore. This is a subtle yet profound shift. Rather than being the pursuer, you become the standard. You embody the values, the dignity, and the autonomy that they can sense but cannot control. Let's take a moment to explore why this works psychologically. Avoidants have learned, often unconsciously, to push against emotional intensity because it triggers fear or discomfort. They resist when they feel trapped, pressured, or manipulated. But boundaries are not pressure, they are structure. They are a predictable, consistent framework that allows them to engage without feeling smothered. And here's the paradox. The clearer your boundaries, the more they respect and even desire your presence. It's not manipulation, it's alignment with your own truth. Setting boundaries also cultivates self-mastery. When you know your limits, you no longer react impulsively to every slight, every withdrawal, every emotional test. You respond with intention. You choose your actions based on your values, not on the avoidance patterns of someone else. This is empowerment in its purest form. Your emotional state is yours to govern, and in that governance, you reveal a magnetism that is far more compelling than chasing ever could be. Importantly, boundaries protect your dignity. Avoidance will push, they will retreat, they will test, but if you maintain your boundaries, you maintain yourself. You send a message without confrontation. I am not negotiable. I am not a project. I am a person of value, and my life, my energy, my peace is not available for compromise. And that message resonates deeper than any pleading, any pursuit, any attempt to reason with avoidance. Strength expressed through boundaries is magnetic, irresistible, and unforgettable. So what does this teach us? That the real power in relationships, especially with avoidance, is not in chasing, not in trying to break down walls, not in bending yourself to meet their fears. The power is in defining yourself, in knowing your worth, in setting limits with clarity, consistency, and compassion for yourself and others. Boundaries are not just protection, they are attraction. They are a declaration of independence. They are the tool by which you reclaim your energy, your voice, and ultimately, your dignity. And when you combine boundaries with the principles we've already discussed, strategic withdrawal, absence is power, you create a dynamic where you are no longer reactive, no longer chasing, no longer losing yourself. You are fully present in your own life, fully aligned with your values, and fully magnetic without effort. Let's talk about a principle that can completely change the way you approach relationships, especially with avoidance: the psychology of pull versus push. Most people live their lives in push mode. They push for attention, they push for connection, they push for reassurance, often without even realizing it. And here's the thing. With avoidance, that push almost always triggers the opposite effect. They retreat, they withdraw, they pull away further. It's not personal, it's wiring. They are wired to resist emotional pressure, to step back when closeness feels like control. And when you understand this, you realize that the real power is not in pushing, it's in pulling. Pulling is subtle, it's strategic, and it's profoundly powerful. Pulling is about creating an irresistible gravitational force, not through pursuit, but through presence, consistency, and dignity. It's the difference between trying to make someone want you and creating a life that naturally draws them toward you. It's not manipulation, it's alignment with your own value, your own joy, your own purpose. When you pull instead of push, you become the prize, not because you demand attention, but because your energy, your independence, and your self-possession cannot be ignored. Let's break down why this works. Avoidants respond to pressure by retreating, but they respond to calm, confident distance with curiosity. When you chase, You are telling them that their presence is necessary for your happiness, and that triggers their need to escape. But when you step back, maintain your boundaries, and live fully in your own world, you send a different signal. You are saying, I am complete without you, I am full, I am alive, I am independent. And that signal, that is magnetic. It is the pull they cannot resist because it communicates freedom, strength, and self-respect, qualities they may sense but have difficulty sustaining themselves. Pulling also allows them to come forward on their own terms. This is crucial because avoidants fear losing autonomy. The moment you push, you remove their sense of control and their instinct is to protect themselves. But when you pull, you invite them to approach you voluntarily. This is where the psychology of desire comes into play. Desire thrives when it is self-initiated. The more you chase, the less they feel they have a choice. The more you create space, the more they feel the freedom to pursue, and that freedom makes the pursuit exponentially more powerful. Think about it like this. When you push, you are saying, I need you, please come closer. But when you pull, you are saying, I am complete. You are welcome to join me if you choose. One communicates lack, the other communicates abundance, and abundance is irresistible. It is not just attractive, it is unforgettable. Avoidants, like everyone else, are drawn to what they cannot take for granted. By embodying pull instead of push, you are no longer an option they can ignore. You are a presence they cannot forget. The pull is reinforced by everything we've discussed so far: strategic withdrawal, absence as a tool, and boundaries as a declaration of self-worth. Each of these elements amplifies your pull because they communicate something deeper than words ever could. That you are grounded, that you are intentional, that you are not chasing, and that your life is full without dependence on their attention. And when they sense that, their curiosity turns into reflection, their reflection turns into longing, and longing turns into desire. Pulling is also about emotional mastery. When you maintain calm in the face of avoidance, when you do not react impulsively to their withdrawal or testing, you are demonstrating control over your inner state. Avoidants can sense this immediately. They may try to test boundaries, to provoke reactions, to measure your dependence, but when you respond with steady confidence instead of emotional reactivity, you reinforce the pull. You become a constant magnetic presence in their psyche, a force they notice but cannot fully define or possess. Here's the critical takeaway. In relationships with avoidance, less is often more. The fewer times you push, the more powerful your pull becomes. It is a paradox of attraction that requires patience, discipline, and unwavering self-respect. But once you understand and embody it, you stop chasing, you stop compromising your value, and you start living from a place of power. You are no longer desperate for their attention. You are magnetic because you are fully yourself. Let's talk about self-mastery. This is the secret that most people never fully grasp, and yet it is the single most magnetic quality you can embody, especially when it comes to someone with an avoidant attachment style. Self-mastery is not about controlling others, it is not about manipulation, and it is not about creating a false image of strength. Self-mastery is about owning yourself completely, your emotions, your desires, your actions, your energy. It's about being so fully aligned with who you are that nothing external can unbalance you, and that alignment becomes a force that others cannot ignore. When you step into self-mastery, you are no longer reactive to avoidance, confusion, or emotional games. You don't chase, you don't plead, and you don't compromise your dignity. You respond from a place of clarity, presence, and intentionality, and this is profoundly magnetic. Avoidants are naturally drawn to people who are whole, who are complete, who are not dependent on them for validation. They may resist closeness, they may withdraw, they may even test you, but when they encounter someone who has mastered themselves, they cannot help but notice. There is a subtle, undeniable pull that comes from self-possession, a gravitational force that draws attention without effort. Self-mastery begins with emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize, understand, and regulate your own emotions. This doesn't mean suppressing feelings or pretending to be indifferent. It means acknowledging them, owning them, and choosing how you respond. When you respond from a place of mastery rather than reactivity, you demonstrate a strength that is invisible yet palpable. Avoidants sense it immediately. They can feel the difference between someone who needs them and someone who is fully responsible for their own inner world. That difference is magnetic because it communicates security, stability, and presence, qualities that are rare and deeply attractive. But self-mastery goes beyond emotional intelligence. It is about prioritizing your growth, your joy, and your purpose above the whims of someone else's availability. It's about living a life so full and rich that your happiness does not depend on them, and yet your presence enhances their world. When you pursue your goals, nurture your passions, and cultivate your values, you are sending a silent, powerful message. You are whole, You are thriving, and you are unapologetically yourself. That is far more attractive than anything you could say or do to win someone over. Here's the crucial insight. People, avoidance included, don't crave what they can control. They crave what they cannot control, yet deeply respect. Self-mastery creates exactly that dynamic. It is a paradoxical kind of attraction. The more independent and aligned you are with yourself, the more others feel drawn to you. It is not about scarcity or gamesmanship. It is about presence, integrity, and the embodiment of your own value. Avoidants are wired to sense this immediately. They may try to test, they may resist, but the pull of someone who is fully self-possessed is almost impossible to ignore. Self-mastery also strengthens your boundaries. When you are aligned with your own worth, enforcing limits becomes effortless. You no longer fear rejection, and you no longer bend to meet someone else's emotional patterns. Instead, you operate from a place of calm authority. You decide what you will accept, and you act in accordance with your values. This combination of clarity and consistency makes you magnetic because it communicates that you are not just alive, you are thriving on your own terms. And let's be honest, mastery is deeply attractive because it inspires respect. Avoidants, like all humans, are drawn to strength that is grounded in authenticity. They notice confidence that is earned, not fabricated. They notice someone who is fully accountable for themselves and does not rely on them for completeness. That energy is powerful, it is compelling, and it awakens curiosity, longing, and desire without you ever needing to push or chase. Finally, self-mastery creates freedom. Freedom from the need to control, freedom from emotional dependency, freedom from reacting impulsively to every withdrawal or test. And in that freedom, there is an undeniable magnetism. You become a person who is not defined by the absence or presence of another, but by the fullness of your own life. Your energy radiates independence, and that radiance draws others toward you, not because you are trying to attract them, but because you are living fully in your own power. Let's end by addressing something every person who's ever been in a relationship with an avoidant struggles with: reclaiming your power without regret. There's a natural tendency to feel guilty for stepping back, for prioritizing yourself, for creating space. There's a whisper inside that says, am I being too cold? Am I abandoning them? And it's here, in this tension between care and self-respect, that your real growth begins. Reclaiming your power is not about punishing the other person. It's not about proving anything to them. It's about honoring yourself in the deepest, most uncompromising way possible. When you take your power back, you are doing something radical. You are choosing your life, your energy, and your boundaries over someone else's avoidance patterns. You are no longer living in reaction to their push and pull. You are living intentionally on your terms. This is the essence of dignity. Dignity is not just an abstract concept. It is the daily practice of showing up fully for yourself, regardless of how others behave. It is the courage to be seen, the strength to be independent, and the wisdom to know that your value is inherent, not contingent on their validation. Reclaiming power also requires you to confront your own attachments, the ways you may have allowed someone else's emotional availability to define your own sense of worth. This is uncomfortable because it forces you to look honestly at patterns you may have repeated for years: the chasing, the justifications, the endless hoping for them to meet you where you are. But once you face it, you understand a liberating truth. The power was never theirs to give. It was always within you. And by stepping into it fully, you create a space where they are no longer a determining factor in your emotional state. Let me be clear. Reclaiming your power does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you erase feelings or pretend that connection never mattered. It means you elevate yourself above dependency, above emotional volatility, and above the compulsion to fix what cannot be fixed for them. Avoidants are often trapped by their own patterns, by fears of intimacy and vulnerability. You cannot force them to change. You cannot bend them to your desires, but you can control one thing: how you allow their behavior to affect your life. And that control, that choice, is liberation. Regret is the enemy of power. When you reclaim your life while holding on to guilt or resentment, you diminish your own energy. But when you act with clarity, intention, and self-respect, regret disappears. You can walk away or step back with a sense of peace because you know your actions were aligned with your highest self. You are not running from them, you are running toward yourself. And that shift in perspective transforms everything. The absence you create, the boundaries you hold, the mastery you embody, they all communicate your value far more effectively than words, and they do it without manipulation, without drama, and without compromise. This reclamation also reframes the way avoidants perceive you. When you move through life fully empowered, they sense your independence and your confidence. They feel the energy of someone who cannot be owned, someone who cannot be coerced or pursued into submission. And paradoxically, that energy draws them toward you because they recognize consciously or unconsciously the completeness they cannot replicate. Your power becomes magnetic precisely because it is authentic. It is not a tool to get them to want you. It is a reflection of your own wholeness. Reclaiming your power without regret is ultimately about freedom. Freedom from the emotional tug of war, freedom from the illusion that someone else determines your happiness, freedom from the exhausting cycles of pursuit and withdrawal. When you claim this freedom, you step into a new kind of life, one where your choices are guided by clarity, your actions by self-respect, and your energy by purpose. In that space, every decision, every interaction, every pause becomes a demonstration of your dignity. And here's the profound truth. By reclaiming your power fully, you transform the dynamic entirely. You no longer need to chase, plead, or compromise. You exist as your own prize, your own authority, your own source of joy. And in that embodiment, even the most avoidant will feel the pull of your energy. Not because you demanded it, but because you became a living demonstration of what it means to live with integrity, courage, and freedom. So let's bring it all together. You've learned that the most powerful moves in relationships, especially with someone avoidant, aren't about chasing, pleading, or trying to control. They are about stepping back with clarity, living fully in your own life, and embodying a presence so strong it cannot be ignored. You've discovered the transformative power of strategic withdrawal, the courage to create space while honoring yourself. You've seen why absence amplifies desire, why pulling rather than pushing ignites curiosity, attention, and even longing in ways that chasing never can. You've learned that boundaries aren't walls. They are your declaration of self-worth, your unshakable dignity. That self-mastery isn't arrogance. It's a magnetic force that communicates strength, calm, and authenticity. And finally, you've understood that reclaiming your power without regret isn't coldness. It's freedom, liberation, and the ultimate act of self-respect. When you operate from this place, you are no longer entangled in games, fears, or dependency. You are whole, you are grounded, you are magnetic. And here's the final undeniable truth. The most compelling attraction is not created by pursuit. It is created by presence, by alignment, and by living your life fully on your own terms. When you disappear with dignity, when you honor your boundaries, when you master yourself and reclaim your power, you do more than shift the dynamic. You transform it. You move from being reactive to proactive, from being a participant in someone else's patterns to being the architect of your own destiny. So step back. Not out of fear, not out of anger, but out of unwavering respect for yourself. Live boldly, live fully, and let your absence and your presence speak louder than any words ever could. Because the greatest attraction, the deepest connection, and the most profound respect come to the person who refuses to compromise their dignity, who embodies their worth, and who lives unapologetically in their own power. Stand in that power. Own your value. And watch as the world and those who once pulled away begin to see, respect, and crave the fullness of who you truly are.